For almost 3 decades, the Pokémon anime has taken fans on one of the longest adventures in television history. From the moment Ash Ketchum left Pallet Town with Pikachu back in 1997, the series has gone through multiple eras, each one changing the anime in different ways. Some eras gave us legendary battles, unforgettable rivals, and incredible character development. Others, completely dropped the ball. But here's the thing, not all Pokémon anime eras are created equal. Some defined entire generations of fans, while others left viewers wondering what exactly went wrong. So today we're ranking every major Pokémon anime era from 1997 all the way to 2027, from the absolute worst to the greatest era the franchise has ever produced. And trust me, this list gets very controversial, because one era on this list reset Ash's character in the worst way possible. Another era delivered the best rival in Pokémon history. And the #1 spot? Let's just say it gave us some of the greatest battles the anime has ever seen. But before we start the ranking, don't forget to subscribe to Animated Memories for more content like this. Coming in at the very bottom of the ranking is the black and white era of the Pokémon anime. Now, to be fair, this era wasn't completely terrible. It had some interesting ideas, a brand new region, and a fresh start in Unova. But compared to the eras that came before and after it, this one struggled the most. And the biggest problem? What they did to Ash Ketchum. After years of growth, experience, and impressive battles in the previous era, fans expected Ash to continue evolving as a trainer. Instead, the Black and White series almost reset his character completely. Ash suddenly started making mistakes that felt completely out of character. Strategies that he mastered in earlier seasons seemed to disappear, and at times it felt like he was back to being a beginner trainer all over again. For longtime fans who had watched his journey for years, it was frustrating to see that development basically vanish overnight. And unfortunately, that wasn't the only issue. Another big weakness of this era was the lack of strong rival characters. Pokémon has always been at its best when Ash has a great rival pushing him to become stronger. But in this series, none of the rivals ever reached the same level of intensity or depth that fans had seen before. The story pacing also felt inconsistent. Some arcs started strong but didn't fully deliver, and several moments that could have been exciting ended up feeling rushed or underwhelming. One moment in particular still gets talked about by fans to this day, Ash losing a major battle in a way that left many viewers completely shocked. And not in a good way. When an era leaves fans questioning decisions like that, it becomes hard for the series to maintain momentum. Now again, this era wasn't completely without positives. The introduction of new Pokémon, the exploration of the Unova region, and some of the lighter character moments still had their charm. But when you compare it to the storytelling, rival dynamics, and battle intensity that other Pokémon eras delivered, the Black and White era simply doesn't reach the same level, which is why when ranking every era of the Pokémon anime, this one unfortunately lands at number 8. But the next entry on our list proves something interesting, because even though it contains one of the biggest accomplishments in Ash's entire journey, many fans still feel the era itself had some major problems. Coming in at number 7, At number 7 on the list, we have the Pokémon Journeys era. This series marked one of the most unique chapters in the history of the Pokémon anime. Instead of focusing on a single region like previous seasons, Pokémon Journeys completely changed the formula. For the first time ever, Ash Ketchum wasn't just traveling through one region trying to earn gym badges. Instead, he and his new companion Go explored multiple regions across the Pokémon world. In theory, this was an amazing idea. It meant fans could revisit classic locations, see returning characters, and experience Pokémon from many different generations all in one series. And to be fair, the era delivered some truly exciting moments. The biggest highlight was the introduction of the World Coronation series, a global tournament where Ash battled some of the strongest trainers on the planet in order to climb the rankings. This storyline eventually led to one of the most historic battles in the entire anime, Ash facing off against the undefeated champion Leon. And when Ash finally won that battle, he officially became the strongest trainer in the world. For fans who had followed his journey since the very beginning, it was a massive moment. But despite that incredible payoff, the road getting there had some problems, because Pokémon Journeys sometimes struggled with focus. Unlike previous eras that had a clear regional adventure, this series constantly jumped between different locations and storylines. One episode might focus on Ash's battles, while the next would shift completely to Go's goal of catching every Pokémon. And while Go was an interesting character, many fans felt that his story sometimes overshadowed Ash's development, which was surprising considering this era was supposed to build toward Ash's biggest achievement ever. The pacing could also feel uneven at times. Some important battles happened quickly, while other episodes focused on side stories that didn't always move the main narrative forward. Still, it's impossible to ignore what this era accomplished. Pokémon Journeys gave Ash the victory that fans had been waiting for more than 2 decades. It brought back beloved characters, celebrated the entire history of the franchise, and finally allowed Ash to reach the top of the Pokémon world. Because of those huge moments, this era definitely deserves credit. But when you look at the overall storytelling, pacing, and focus compared to other Pokémon series, it doesn't quite reach the same level of consistency as the best eras in the anime. Which is why Pokémon Journeys lands here at number 7. But now we move into an era that started everything. The series that introduced the world to Pokémon, created one of the most iconic duos in anime history, and launched a franchise that would go on to dominate global pop culture. Coming in at number 6. Now we're stepping into the classic era that started it all. The original series, running from 1997 to 2002. This is the era that introduced the world to Ash Ketchum and his iconic partner Pikachu, and it's the series that truly defined Pokémon for an entire generation. The original series covers everything from the Indigo League to the Orange Islands and finally the Johto region, and it set the formula that would guide every Pokémon era for years to come. So why is it ranked at number 6 and not higher? Let's start with the positives. The nostalgia factor here is off the charts. Every fan who grew up in the late 90s remembers the thrill of seeing Ash catch a new Pokémon, battle a gym leader, or face off against Team Rocket in their latest schemes. This era also gave us some of the most memorable characters, from Misty and Brock to iconic rivals like Gary Oak. The personalities were distinct, the humor landed perfectly, and the adventures felt like a real journey. And let's not forget the battles. While early animation had its limits, the original series still delivered classic Pokémon moments. Pikachu taking down massive opponents, epic gym battles, and the first glimpses of the strategy that would define Pokémon battles in the future. But there are some things holding this era back from being higher on the list. First, Ash's battle intelligence wasn't always consistent. Sometimes he would seem like a brilliant strategist, and other times he'd make beginner mistakes that felt out of character. Then there's the infamous filler episodes. We all remember episodes where Ash and friends just wandered aimlessly or dealt with random side quests that didn't really add to the story. Animation is also a factor. While charming, some of the early fights and Pokémon designs feel dated compared to later eras that pushed animation quality to cinematic levels. Still, it's impossible to overstate the influence of this era. Without the original series, there would be no Pokémon anime empire. It built the characters, the friendships, and the sense of adventure that continues to resonate with fans to this day. It's the era that made Pokémon a household name worldwide, and for that, it absolutely earns a spot in the top half of this ranking. So, while it may not have the polish or maturity of later series, the original series will always hold a special place in the hearts of fans everywhere. Next up, we enter an era that introduced serious character growth, new challenges, and some of the most compelling rivalries in Pokémon history. Coming in at number 5. Coming in at number 5 is the Sun and Moon era, one of the most talked about chapters in the Pokémon anime, and for good reason. From the very start, this era sparked controversy. The most obvious change? The art style. Characters were drawn with softer, more exaggerated designs, giving the series a cartoony look that some fans absolutely loved, and others us not so much. But beyond the art style, this era absolutely shined in character development and storytelling. Ash was finally allowed to grow as a person beyond his usual patterns. The friendships he formed at the Pokémon School were heartfelt, his interactions with classmates felt genuine, and the show leaned into emotional storytelling like never before. The characters themselves were a huge highlight. Each companion had a distinct personality that added depth and humor to the series, making even lighthearted episodes feel engaging. Some of the most memorable storylines came from characters like Lily, whose arc was both emotional and empowering, or the Ultra Beast storyline, which introduced high-stakes adventures and new lore that expanded the Pokémon universe in exciting ways. And of course, the Alola League was a major payoff for fans. After years of ups and downs, Ash finally won his first official Pokémon League, marking a milestone moment in the anime and making this era unforgettable. While it wasn't perfect, the art style and pacing were divisive, the emotional moments, strong character work, and meaningful victories make Sun and Moon one of the most impactful Pokémon eras to date. It's an era that took risks, delivered heart, and reminded fans that the Pokémon anime could still surprise and move us decades into the franchise. Next, we move into an era that not only kept the adventure formula alive, but also introduced more mature themes, stronger rivals, and incredible contests that shaped Pokémon storytelling for years. Coming in at number 4, at number 4, we have the Advanced Generation era, which brought fresh energy to the Pokémon anime while building on everything the original series had accomplished. This era took Ash on a new journey through the Hoenn region, and later the Battle Frontier in Kanto, introducing new companions like May and Max, who brought both humor and heartfelt character moments to the series. One of the biggest strengths of this era was character development. May's journey as a Pokémon coordinator added depth and emotion, giving fans a reason to care beyond the usual gym battles. Max, while young, provided comic relief and thoughtful insights that made the group feel dynamic. The rivalries were stronger than ever. Trainers like Drew pushed Ash to refine his strategies, while the competitive battles added a level of tension and excitement that had been missing in some previous arcs. This era also brought in contests, which added a completely new layer to the Pokémon world. Watching May compete, grow, and overcome challenges in Pokémon contests gave fans something fresh to engage with while still keeping battles exciting. Battles themselves were more strategic and visually polished than earlier seasons. Ash's growth as a trainer was noticeable, and for many fans, the Advanced Generation era struck a balance between nostalgia and modern storytelling. However, it wasn't without its minor flaws. Some arcs outside of the main storyline felt less compelling, and certain episodes focused more on humor than advancing the plot. But overall, the era maintained consistency in storytelling, character growth, and adventure, which is why it lands high on the ranking. The Advanced Generation era proved that Pokémon could evolve with its audience, while still honoring the core spirit of adventure that made the series iconic. Next, we enter an era that completely reinvented the anime, and gave fans a bold new vision for Ash's final adventures. Coming in at number 3. At number 3, we step into uncharted territory. The Pokémon Horizons era, the first major Pokémon anime era, without Ash Ketchum as the main protagonist. This era marked a bold move for the Pokémon anime, introducing a fresh storyline centered around Liko and Roy, two new trainers with their own dreams, challenges, and Pokémon companions. One of the biggest strengths of Horizons is its modern storytelling approach. Unlike previous eras that largely followed Ash's journey, Horizons takes a more narrative-driven path, giving viewers complex characters, deeper plot lines, and a story that unfolds with purpose from start to finish. The animation and world building are also a huge step forward. Every region feels alive, battles are dynamic and cinematic, and the Pokémon designs pop in ways that feel both familiar and fresh. Horizons also excels at character relationships. Liko and Roy aren't just partners, they have real conflicts, motivations, and growth arcs that make every episode engaging. Side characters are given meaningful stories too, making the world feel truly lived in. The pacing is tighter, the stakes are higher, and there's a maturity in tone that appeals to both longtime fans and new viewers alike. Fans have noted that this era feels like a fresh chapter that respects the legacy of Pokémon while taking bold steps forward. Of course, some viewers miss Ash, and it will take time for Horizons to fully cement its place in Pokémon history. But from a storytelling, animation, and world-building perspective, it already ranks as one of the strongest eras in the anime. It It proves that the franchise can reinvent itself without losing its core identity, and that Pokémon still has plenty of room to grow and surprise fans in new ways. Next, we step into the era that arguably delivered the most consistent storytelling, the best rivalries, and some of the most iconic battles in Pokémon history, coming in at number 2. Coming in at number 2 is the Diamond and Pearl era, often hailed by fans as one of the strongest and most consistent periods in the Pokémon anime. Set in the Sinnoh region, this era brought a perfect balance of adventure, strategy, and character growth. Ash's journey here felt more focused than ever, with a clear goal: conquer the Sinnoh League and prove himself as a top trainer. One of the standout features of this era was Ash's rivalry with Paul, arguably the most intense and compelling rival relationship the series has ever had. Paul pushed Ash to rethink his strategies, challenged his morals as a trainer, and created some of the most dramatic and emotional battles in Pokémon history. The battles themselves were next level, with serious strategy, Pokémon growth, and tension that kept fans on the edge of their seats. Episodes like Ash vs. Paul or the Infernape arc weren't just fights. They were storytelling masterpieces, combining emotion, stakes, and skill in a way that few previous eras managed. Character development also shown here. Dawn's journey as a Pokémon coordinator was inspiring, with contests that felt meaningful and rewarding. And while the series still maintained humor and lighthearted moments, the stakes were consistently higher, making each victory feel earned. The animation quality improved, and the world of Sinnoh felt alive, vibrant, and dangerous in all the right ways. Every episode contributed to a sense of growth, challenge, and adventure, keeping both new and longtime fans engaged. The only reason this era doesn't take the top spot is that the next era refined these strengths even further, delivering battles and storytelling that are widely regarded as the pinnacle of Pokémon anime. But there's no denying it. Diamond and Pearl set a gold standard for storytelling, rivalries, and epic battles in the Pokémon universe. And now, it's time for the #1 Pokémon anime era, the one that captured the hearts of fans with unmatched battles, mature storytelling, and Ash at his absolute best. Coming in at number 1. And finally, taking the top spot, we have the XY/XYZ era, widely considered the peak of the Pokémon anime. Set in the vibrant Kalos region, this era combined everything fans loved about Pokémon with a mature, polished, and emotionally resonant approach. Ash was no longer just a rookie making mistakes. Here, he finally became the trainer fans had been waiting for, with the strategy, experience, and confidence to take on the strongest challengers. One of the biggest highlights of this era was the Ash-Greninja phenomenon. This bond wasn't just about power, it represented growth, trust, and an emotional connection between trainer and Pokémon that elevated battles to cinematic levels. The rivalries were also at their absolute best. Ash's confrontations weren't just fights, they were stories filled with tension, strategy, and emotion, and each victory felt genuinely hard-earned. The Team Flare arc added a level of narrative depth that few Pokémon series have ever achieved. It wasn't just about catching Pokémon or winning badges. There was real conflict, stakes, and consequences that gave the anime dramatic weight. Animation was another huge leap forward. Every battle was beautifully choreographed, the Pokémon moved with fluidity and energy, and the settings of Kolos came alive with color and detail. Ultimately, what puts XY/XYZ at number 1 is how it balanced nostalgia, growth, and epic storytelling. It honored the roots of Pokémon while pushing the anime to new heights, giving fans battles, emotions, and character arcs that are still talked about today. This era didn't just entertain, it defined what Pokémon could achieve as a modern anime, and that's why it rightfully takes the #1 spot. So there you have it. Every Pokémon anime era ranked from worst to best, from the highs, lows, and unforgettable moments, spanning 1997 all the way to 2027. But now, I want to hear from you. Do you agree with this ranking? Or is there an era you think deserves a higher spot? Let me know in the comments below because Pokémon fans are always ready to debate this list.